The faces in the boardroom turned toward me with that mixture of pity and awkward discomfort that signals the end of a career. I stood frozen mid-sentence, my presentation on the massive display behind me, showing 4 years of my research, the breakthrough that was supposed to secure our company's future. "I am sorry to interrupt, Gavin," Chloe said, not sounding sorry at all, as she strode in wearing a suit that cost more than my rent. "Charles's daughter had perfect timing as always, but there's been a change of plan." I watched her glide to the front of the room while my body went numb, fingers still hovering over my clicker. The 8 investors, who minutes earlier had been nodding along to my presentation, now straightened in their chairs, their attention completely redirected. "My father asked me to share some exciting news," Chloe continued, not even glancing my way. "We have developed an alternative approach that shows significantly better market potential." My throat closed as she pulled up her own presentation, effortlessly minimizing mine with a casual gesture that seemed to mirror what she was doing to my entire existence. The room's attention shifted completely as my work disappeared from view. "We do not need your ideas anymore," she said to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear as she walked past. Then louder, to the room, "Gavin's work laid important groundwork, but we are taking a more innovative direction." I stood there, invisible now, as she showed slides that looked suspiciously like concepts I had discussed during late nights in the lab, concepts I had written in my personal notebooks, which now belonged to Chloe. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Alistair, our lead investor, actually stood up. "This is exactly what we hoped to see," he said, beaming at Chloe. "Much more commercially viable." I packed my laptop with mechanical movements as they discussed funding rounds and expansion plans. Nobody noticed when I slipped my key card out of my wallet and placed it on the table. I caught Charles's eye as I headed for the door. The chief executive officer, who had once told me I was the future of his company, now looked through me like I was already gone. "Enjoy the funding," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. It was only when I reached my car that the shaking started. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. 4 years of work, my innovation, my future, and most crushing of all, they did not even need me to explain it. Chloe had studied my work closely enough to present it as her own. I drove home in a daze, already calculating what I needed to withdraw before Charles realized what I had done. I had 72 hours at most. My name is Gavin Miller. I am 48 years old, and I am not what most people picture when they think of a scientific innovator. I do not have advanced degrees from prestigious universities or family connections in the industry. What I do have is an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others miss, and the stubborn persistence to follow them to their conclusion. I grew up watching my mother, Miriam Miller, clean other people's homes, studying at whatever desk or table was available in whatever apartment we could afford that month. I clawed my way through college on scholarships and waiter tips. When most students were sleeping, I was in labs, assisting on research that never bore my name. Charles Vance hired me 5 years ago, despite my unconventional background. "Fresh perspectives create breakthroughs," he had said during my interview, seeming genuinely impressed by my self-taught approach to molecular biology. For 4 years, I worked 12-hour days developing a method to stabilize volatile compounds that could revolutionize how we deliver targeted medications to the body. It was not just a job, it was my life's work, the innovation that would finally prove I belonged. Chloe arrived 10 months ago with a made-up title, Strategic Innovation Director. Charles introduced her with proud father eyes, telling us all how lucky we were to have her fresh perspective. I tried to be welcoming. I shared my research when she asked questions, explained my methodology when she seemed interested. I thought she genuinely wanted to learn. "You are brilliant, Gavin," she told me once, leaning against my workstation. "But you do not understand how this industry actually works." I did not realize those words were both a warning and a threat. The meeting with investors had been scheduled for months, my chance to present directly to the people who controlled our future funding. Charles had personally told me to prepare, had reviewed my slides, had nodded with satisfaction at the results I presented. Then, 4 days before the meeting, Chloe started asking more detailed questions. She insisted on seeing my latest lab notebooks. She wanted to understand the commercial applications more clearly. I opened the door to my apartment now, tossing my keys onto the counter and staring at the emptiness. My cat, Einstein, rubbed against my ankles, sensing my distress. I picked him up, burying my face in his fur as the reality crashed over me. She had not just stolen my presentation, she had stolen my future. By this time tomorrow, Charles would realize what I had withdrawn, and then the real chaos would begin. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena Brooks, my closest friend at the lab. What happened? Everyone is talking, but nobody knows anything. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you explain having your life's work ripped away? How do you admit you have just walked away from everything you have built? Before I could decide, another message appeared. This one from Charles himself. We need to talk. Now. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop instead. There was work to do. The next morning dawned with the artificial calm that precedes a storm. I showered, dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, and prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. My laptop contained everything I needed, the proof that would either save me or destroy us. When I arrived at the research park, the security guard waved me through with a confused expression. "Thought you quit yesterday," he said. "Not officially," I answered with a smile that felt like broken glass on my lips. The lab was buzzing with unusual energy when I walked in. Conversations stopped as I passed. Colleagues avoided eye contact. I walked directly to my station and began gathering my personal items, ignoring the whispers that followed me. Elena appeared at my side, her voice low and urgent. "Charles has been looking for you since yesterday afternoon. He is ballistic. What did you do?" I carefully placed my coffee mug in my bag. Nothing he did not deserve. "Gavin, this is not like you. Tell me what is happening." Before I could answer, Charles's voice boomed across the lab. "Gavin, my office now." The walk to his office felt like crossing a battlefield. Every eye tracked my movement, waiting for the explosion. Charles stood in his doorway, face flushed with anger. His designer suit somehow making him look more desperate rather than powerful. "Close the door," he barked when I entered. I did so carefully, then stood waiting. I would not sit unless invited, a small act of defiance that I knew would register with him. "Where is it?" he demanded. I tilted my head slightly. "Where is what, exactly? Do not play games with me. You know exactly what is missing. The investors are arriving in an hour to finalize everything, and suddenly we cannot access the core stabilization process, the one under my charge." I let his words hang in the air between us, enjoying the way his certainty began to crack in the face of my silence. "I am afraid I do not know what you mean," I said finally. "According to yesterday's meeting, you are going with Chloe's concept instead. My ideas are not needed anymore." Charles's face darkened. "Her concept relies on your stabilization process, which is suddenly incomplete in our systems." "What did you remove?" I smiled then, the kind of smile that comes from knowing you hold all the cards, while your opponent has just realized they have been bluffing with nothing. "I did not remove anything from company systems, Charles. That would be unethical and possibly illegal. Then explain to me why we cannot replicate your results this morning. The investors are expecting a demonstration in 60 minutes. The door opened behind me, and Chloe swept in, her confidence from yesterday replaced with barely contained panic. "Father, the lab team cannot." She stopped short when she saw me. "What is he doing here?" I turned to face her, maintaining my calm. "I came to collect my things, since you made it clear yesterday that my ideas are not needed anymore." Chloe looked from me to her father and back again. "You did something. We cannot get the stabilization process to work." "That is unfortunate," I said, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "Have you tried following your own innovative approach, the one you presented yesterday?" The color drained from her face. "You know I was building on your work, did I? That was not mentioned in your presentation. In fact, I believe you specifically said you had developed an alternative approach." Charles stepped forward. "Enough games. The investors will be here soon. Fix this, and we can discuss compensation, a promotion, whatever you want." I looked at him directly. "I am afraid I cannot help you, Charles. As I said, I did not remove anything from company systems. Everything I developed while employed here remains intact." "Then why is it not working?" Chloe hissed. I checked my watch deliberately. Perhaps because science requires understanding, not just slides and buzzwords. I moved toward the door. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a meeting of my own to attend. Charles moved to block my path. You are not going anywhere until you fix this. I kept my expression neutral as I looked up at Charles. Are you physically preventing me from leaving? Because that would create a whole different set of problems for you. The implied threat hung between us. Charles was many things, ruthless, calculating, privileged, but he was not stupid. After a moment, he stepped aside, his jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth cracking. This is not over, he said. Actually, it is, I replied, walking past him. I quit yesterday. Remember? When your daughter announced that my ideas are not needed anymore. I felt their stares as I walked through the lab. Colleagues who had been whispering now watched in silence. As I reached the door, Chloe's voice rang out. He sabotaged us. I did not turn around. Doubt, confusion, and fear were spreading. The investors would arrive to find chaos instead of confidence. Outside, I took a deep breath. The air felt cleansing. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls and a text from Elena. What just happened? I got into my car and watched the main entrance. 7 minutes later, Alistair arrived with 2 other investors. They had no idea they were walking into a disaster. Another 15 minutes passed before my phone rang. I answered, Gavin speaking. This is Alistair Finch. We need to talk. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street, 5 minutes. He hung up. I smiled. Right on schedule. When I entered the coffee shop, Alistair was seated in a corner booth. His tie was slightly askew, showing signs of strain. I ordered a black coffee before joining him, taking my time to establish control through unhurried movements. What happened in there? He demanded when I finally sat down. I sipped my coffee. You will have to be more specific. Do not play games, Gavin. Yesterday, Chloe presents a revolutionary stabilization process. Today, nobody can make it work, and Charles looks like he is about to have a stroke. That sounds stressful for them. Alistair leaned forward. 8 investors are ready to commit $95 million in funding, but not if this is smoke and mirrors. I nodded. What do you want? He was direct, to make the process work like it did in all the reports we reviewed. I am not employed there anymore. That can change. We can triple your salary of $145,000 plus stock options. I shook my head. You are negotiating for the wrong company, Alistair. I am not going back to Charles. Then what do you want? You are investing in a specific molecular stabilization process, correct? Yes. And you verified it works? He shifted. The preliminary data was compelling, but this morning nobody can make it work. I said, does that not concern you? It would concern me if I did not think you were behind it. I smiled. In yesterday's presentation, who did Chloe say developed this process? He frowned. She presented it as her team's work. Her team, I nodded. I am saying you should be very careful about where you put $95 million. I stood up, especially when the person presenting cannot actually deliver what they are selling. Alistair reached for my arm. We need to continue this conversation. I agree, but not here. Call this number at 4 p.m. today if you want to see what actually works. I left him staring at the card. The weight of $95 million was a massive anchor, and they could not risk throwing it into a sinking ship. By the time I returned to my apartment, my phone was buzzing with notifications. The lab was in complete disarray. Technicians could not replicate results, and Chloe was desperately blaming the equipment. Charles was threatening everyone. Elena texted that Charles just fired Owen. What is happening? I did not respond. Instead, I prepared for my 4 p.m. meeting. At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. The security camera showed Charles standing there alone. He had come himself, bypassing his usual driver. I let him in. He looked much older than before, showing visible cracks. May I come in? I stepped aside, letting him feel the modest scale of the place where the real science happened. He glanced around my modest apartment, taking in the stacks of journals, and my cat watching warily from a bookshelf. The investors walked out, he said finally. I am sorry to hear that. No, you are not. There was no anger in his voice now, just exhaustion. You planned this. I planned nothing, Charles. I simply quit after being publicly humiliated and having my work stolen. He winced at my directness. Chloe was overzealous. She should not have presented without acknowledging your contributions. Contributions? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. That is an interesting way to describe creating the entire process. We can fix this, he said, moving to sit on my sofa without invitation. Come back. Full credit, higher position, name your terms. I studied him, this man who had once represented opportunity to me. Why would I trust you now? Because without you, we lose everything. The company, the funding, everything we have built. You mean everything I built while you took the credit? He flinched but did not deny it. What do you want, Gavin? I want you to leave. Be reasonable. We both lose if you— No, Charles, only you lose. I glanced at my watch. I have a meeting to attend. His face darkened. With whom? That is not your concern anymore. He stood, anger replacing fatigue. You cannot take our research to competitors. Everything you develop belongs to the company. I did not take anything that belongs to the company, Charles. I promise you that. His eyes narrowed. Then why cannot we make it work? I opened the door, indicating our conversation was over. Perhaps because science is complex and not everything can be stolen with a flashy presentation. As he stepped toward the door, his phone rang. He checked it, his expression shifting from anger to concern. We are not finished, he said, answering the call as he walked out. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. My hands trembled slightly. Confrontation had never been my strength, but I was beyond caring about comfort now. At 4 p.m. exactly, my phone rang. Hello, Alistair, I answered. Have you decided if you are interested in seeing something that actually works? I am listening, he replied, but I am not alone. Who is with you? The entire investment group. After this morning's situation, we need certainty. I smiled to myself. Text me the address. I will bring everything you need to see. 2 hours later, I stood before the 8 investors in a private conference room. No Charles, no Chloe, just me and my work. Before I begin, I said, what you are about to see belongs to me, not Charles's company. I launched into my presentation, explaining the true methodology and demonstrating the results with samples I had prepared. I described how the stabilization process works at a molecular level, explaining how we use a specific lipid shell to shield the compound from enzymatic breakdown in the blood. In the company's systems, I had only left the basic structure, which would fall apart the moment it encountered a real biological environment. The true stabilization requires a precise sequence of temperature changes and catalytic triggers during synthesis. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Alistair spoke. This is remarkable work, Gavin. Another investor, Lydia Thornton, asked, have you established your own company? I have, as of 4 weeks ago. Before yesterday's presentation, I sensed which way the wind was blowing. And the process? The intellectual property belongs to me personally, developed through independent research conducted outside company hours using my own resources. Charles will fight that claim, Lydia said. Let him try, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. This contains documentation of every step I took to protect my work, verified by independent legal counsel. Under California Labor Code Section 2870, any invention developed entirely on an employee's own time without using the employer's equipment, supplies, facilities, or trade secret information belongs solely to the employee. I was meticulous. I purchased my own laboratory equipment, rented a small workspace, and kept rigorous records of every hour spent. More importantly, I secured a provisional patent application under Title 35, Section 111 of the United States Code 4 weeks before I quit. My lawyer, a sharp specialist named Evelyn Cross, had assured me that this was our strongest shield. The law explicitly states that even if an invention relates to the employer's business, it remains the employee's sole property if developed without company resources and outside working hours. Alistair opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing interest. You have been planning this for months. I have been protecting myself for months, I corrected. There is a difference. Why could their lab not replicate the results? Lydia asked. Because they never fully understood the process from the beginning, I replied. They had my results, but not my methodology. What they have is an older, incomplete version. I hold the key to that sequence, and it was never written on company servers. The documentation was overwhelming. I had saved receipts for every single piece of glassware, every centrifuge tube, and every micropipette I bought with my own credit card. I had logs of my home internet usage, showing when I accessed public scientific databases, and security logs showing I was physically at home when the breakthrough was coded. That is devastating for them, Alistair said. The investors exchanged glances. We need to discuss this privately, Alistair finally said. I gathered my materials. Of course. No, Lydia interrupted. Stay, please. I have more questions. Your documentation shows you developed this independently, but you were employed by Charles. Most contracts have intellectual property clauses. Mine did as well. I acknowledged, which is why I was careful to develop the critical components on my own time, with my own equipment. The lab results they have show a version that works, but not the refined process I have developed since realizing what was happening. And when was that exactly? Another investor asked. When Chloe arrived, I said simply. She asked too many specific questions, spent too much time examining my notes, rather than understanding the science. After the second time I caught her going through my desk after hours, I created a separate research path. Alistair's eyebrows shot up. You have proof of that? I nodded. Security footage. I requested it, claiming I had misplaced some notes. The cameras caught her at my workstation at 10:30 p.m. on 4 separate occasions when I was not present. This constitutes a direct violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act under Title 18, Section 1030 of the United States Code, as well as a breach of fiduciary duty. The room went quiet again. I could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Not just financial ones, but reputational. Nobody wanted to back a company built on stolen research. What exactly are you proposing? Alistair finally asked. My company, Zenith E Therapeutics, is seeking investment to bring this process to market, I said. We are small but focused. And your team is? 4 people, including myself, all experts who left Charles's company because of leadership concerns. Lydia nodded. You have been planning this for some time. I have been protecting my work, I corrected. The exit became necessary when my contributions were ignored. One investor asked, what makes your process different in layman's terms? Imagine trying to deliver medicine to a specific part of the body. Traditional methods are like throwing darts blindfolded. My process creates a guided missile system. The medication remains stable until it reaches exactly where it is needed, then activates. Cancer treatment initially, delivering chemotherapy directly to tumors without damaging healthy tissue. The energy in the room shifted. This was not just about corporate drama anymore. It was about potential that transcended it. We need to verify your claims independently, Alistair said, his voice carrying new respect. I welcome that, I replied. In the meantime, Lydia added, I suggest we pause our discussions with Charles's company. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions. As I packed my presentation materials, Alistair approached me privately. Charles called me 6 times today, he said quietly. I continued organizing my papers. That is unfortunate. He claims you stole research. That would be projection on his part. Alistair studied me for a moment. You knew this would happen, all of it. I met his gaze. I knew what kind of people they were. The rest was just paying attention. As I left the building, my phone vibrated with a text from Elena. Total meltdown happening. Charles firing people left and right. Chloe locked herself in the bathroom crying. What did you do? I did not respond. Some things were better explained in person. When I reached my car, another message appeared from Charles. This is not over. You have made a serious mistake. I felt a strange calm. That evening I met Elena at a restaurant across town. Charles completely lost it, she said. He threw a chair through his office window. Half the senior staff resigned. The investors pulled out completely. You did something, she continued. I protected my work, I replied. Charles wants status and Chloe wants to prove herself. The investors want a return without risk. I want recognition for what I built. Elena sat back. You are starting your own company? Already started 4 weeks ago. Is there room for another scientist? I thought you would never ask. The next morning, my lawyer called with news. Charles had filed an emergency injunction trying to block me from using his research. The federal court had denied it based on the documentation I had provided weeks earlier. He is floundering, my lawyer explained, making desperate moves without proper preparation. The judge ruled that the company failed to show a likelihood of success on the merits and specifically cited California Labor Code Section 2870. The court also noted that Chloe's unauthorized access of your workstation, which violates Title 18, Section 1030 of the United States Code, constituted unclean hands, precluding them from seeking equitable relief. Will there be more legal challenges? Almost certainly, but we are prepared for them. Your foresight in documenting everything independently was crucial. By afternoon, industry blogs were buzzing with rumors. Charles's company's stock had dropped 22%. Board members were calling emergency meetings, and through carefully cultivated contacts, I learned that Chloe had been quietly removed from her position. I did not feel the joy I had expected. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, the vacuum that follows when something that consumed you suddenly evaporates. That evening, Chloe visited my lab. She looked defeated. Against my judgment, I buzzed her in. "This is what destroyed us," she asked. "You destroyed yourselves," I replied. She sank into a chair. "My father will not speak to me. The board removed me." "What did you expect when you stole research without understanding it?" "I improved the presentation," she said. "Science is not about presentations, Chloe. It is about truth, putting in the hours." She looked up. "How did you do it?" "I paid attention to details and patterns. The investors are talking to you now, are they not?" I nodded. "Trust, once broken, is impossible to restore." She stood. "You planned this from the beginning." "No," I corrected. "I created options while you eliminated yours." After she left, I sat alone. 72 hours after she interrupted my presentation, everything had changed. Charles's company was in freefall, and the research would continue under my direction. Proving they were never necessary at all was the best revenge. My phone rang. "Alistair again. We are prepared to offer initial funding of $80 million with performance-based additions that could take it to $130 million. I closed my eyes. "There is something else," he continued. "Charles is being removed as chief executive officer. They are asking about you as a possible replacement." I laughed. "I am flattered, but no, I am building something of my own." When we hung up, I walked through the quiet lab, feeling free. The next morning, a courier delivered a package. Inside was my original lab notebook. A note from Charles read, "You have won. Was it worth it?" I closed the notebook. The answer came that afternoon when I walked into our expanded lab space where Elena and the team were setting up. They looked up with respect. "Ready to change the world?" I asked. Yes, it was worth it. As we began our work that afternoon, the hum of the laboratory equipment felt like a symphony. Elena was calibrating the spectrograph, while our two other colleagues were preparing the first batch of compound carriers. We were no longer working to line the pockets of a chief executive officer who did not understand our science. We were working for ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share your experiences in the comments below. And remember, the best revenge is building yourself up to heights they never imagined.